It's officially a brand new day, so that means it's time to rank every single Spider Man movie from the worst to the best. In last place is Spider Man 3. Now, this is a movie that isn't terrible, because I don't really think any of the Spider Man movies are actually bad per se, but I think this is definitely the one that I have the most problems with and that I like the least out of all of the movies. And really, the biggest problem with the film is Venom and just the symbiote suit in general. Because, Sandman is really great. Everything that they do with Sandman is great. And if the film focused solely just on Sandman and all of the stuff with Sandman, and it was just that, and then you had the stuff with Harry in there as well, since they were setting that up, since the first movie for him to kind of turn evil and become like his father. If it was just that and Sandman, then I think the movie would have been fine. But because Sony made Sam Raimi put Venom in the movie, it hurts the film quite a bit. All of the stuff with Bully Maguire, the memes are very fun and they're great to laugh at, but as a whole, they're genuinely not actually all that good. It's fun to laugh at all of the Bully Maguire shenanigans, but as a whole, it's really not that great. And then casting Eric Foreman as Venom is one of the worst decisions ever, because Venom should be intimidating and should, when he's Eddie Brock, should have the build of a football player. And Eric Foreman is not intimidating at all whatsoever, and he has no muscles at all. He's a super scrawny guy who just doesn't look intimidating at all in any sense. And even when he's Venom, he doesn't act all that intimidating, and you just kind of see Eric Foreman in a Venom suit, because he's just not a good casting for the character at all, because he's just not intimidating at all. And that really hurts the film, because Venom is essentially the main villain of the movie, which takes away from the really great stuff that they were doing with Sandman, while also giving the worst adaptation of Venom I've ever seen. And, it didn't really work for me. And, they really just break Peter and MJ up far too many times throughout the Raimi trilogy. He spends the entire first movie crushing on her, and then when she finally likes him back, he tells her no. And then the second movie, he, tries to get with her, but she's engaged to someone else, and then she runs away from her wedding to get with Peter. And then the third movie, they break up, and then they get back together again at the end of the movie. So they break them up and get them together far too many times in the Raimi trilogy, and that's just a very major problem. So the movie's not terrible by any means, but I think really just the Venom stuff being as bad as it is puts the movie in last place for me. Next on the list is Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I think this is definitely a very overhated movie. I think people hate on this movie far too much. It's definitely not as bad as a lot of people tend to make it sound. It's definitely overhated for sure, but it is also the weakest of Tom's films. Because the entire setup for the movie, everything leading up to the third act, requires a large number of incredibly smart people to make insanely stupid decisions. The entire setup for the movie is that Tony Stark left Peter war glasses in his will. And that it makes absolutely no sense, because Peter is a teenager who was dead for 5 years before Tony died. There were 5 years where Peter was dead. So that raises the question of, like, when did Tony put Peter in his will to give him those glasses in the first place? Because, like, as soon as they brought everybody back, Thanos showed up. So when did Tony have time to change his will? Like, because that means he either didn't change his will in the 5 years between Infinity War and Endgame, or he took a minute while fighting Thanos to be like, hold up, Thanos, hang on. Peter's back. I got to change the will. Peter's back. I got to change my will. I got to give him these war glasses. It makes absolutely no sense, because it either means Tony didn't change his will for 5 years and just left the dead teenager his war glasses that have the capability to blow up pretty much every city in the world, or while fighting Thanos to try and save the world, he paused to change his will and add Peter back into it and give him the glasses with the capability of blowing up every city in the world. Either way, it doesn't make any sense. It's not something Tony Stark would do. He is the smartest person in the MCU until the point where he dies, because once he dies, he's no longer the smartest person because he's dead. But, like, he was the smartest person in the entire world, and he chose to do one of the absolute stupidest things ever and give glasses with the capability of blowing up literally everything to a high school student who was dead for 5 years. And then to make it worse, Nick Fury actually listens to that and gives the glasses to Peter. Technically, it wasn't really Nick Fury, but he still told the Skrulls that were impersonating him and Maria Hill to give the glasses to Peter, which means Nick Fury still decided to listen to the insanely stupid idea of giving war glasses to a teenager who was dead for 5 years. Yeah, he's a relatively responsible teenager, but he's also a very over-trusting teenager who trusts literally everyone. As you see in Homecoming, like when he gets the stolen bike, he literally just leaves it on the street with a note that says, if this isn't your bike, don't take it. And then because he's overly trusting, and Tony gave him the glasses, he then gives them to a supervillain who uses them to almost blow up Europe, just so he can make people think he's a hero. And his motivation, Mysterio's motivation, just isn't all that compelling because of something that's been seen countless times in the MCU. He's just another dude who hates Tony Stark because of something he did in the past. And it's just not a compelling motivation for a villain in the MCU at that point, because it's happened way too many times. Like, there's just so many villains who hate Tony Stark, and that's their entire motivation for doing everything that they do. So it's just not compelling anymore. Like, I think that, once you get to the third act and you start to get into, like, the Mysterio sequences with Peter, running through, like, the illusions whenever he, goes to tell Fury that Mysterio's evil and he actually figures it out. Like, all of that's very good. The visuals for that are great. That's everything that you would want from a live-action adaptation of Mysterio with the visuals. And then, the end where he has to, because he can't trust his eyes, he, has to just kind of close his eyes and just trust his senses and use his Spidey sense to defeat Mysterio and get through the illusions. And the message of the movie becomes more and more relevant every day. Like, it wasn't as relevant when the movie came out, but it's getting more and more relevant every day. because as AI is starting to become more and more prevalent and is starting to become more and more advanced, it's getting to where you can't trust your eyes anymore. Like, because there's all of these like fake AI leaks for like Avengers Doomsday and like a bunch of all of these like different movies and all, and you just can't really trust anything anymore because of AI. So you can't really trust your eyes anymore. You just kind of have to use your instincts, trust your senses, and hope that you know what is real and what is fake. And that was kind of the message of the movie, was that people will kind of believe anything nowadays, and it's getting harder to know what really is true and what isn't. So you kind of have to question everything. You can't just blindly trust things because it's getting harder to know what's real and what's fake. So I think like that message for the movie is a good message that gets better and better every day, but just the entire setup for the movie, everything leading up to the third act, because so many incredibly smart people had to make so many insanely stupid decisions for the movie to happen. I can't really put it any higher than here. Next up is The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I think Andrew Garfield's portrayal of the character is definitely the most underrated version of the character, because he does a very good job, especially when he's in the suit. I think his Spider-Man is actually the one that has the best quips out of all three of the Peters. And he has the fun nature of the character down, and the quippiness and all of that. He has that aspect of the character down really well when he's in the suit. I think that his Peter portrayal in this movie specifically is a little bit too emo. Like in this film, he's just a little bit too emo to be like fully believable as a Peter Parker. But I think that aspect of the character improves with his next two appearances as the character. It's really just a problem with this film. And obviously, the biggest problem with the TASM films was what they did with his parents. They made his parents important, and that is obviously the worst thing you can do with Spider-Man, right? The worst thing you can do with Spider-Man is make his parents important. His parents are supposed to be nobodies. They just kind of died at some point when he was really little, and then he was raised by his aunt and uncle. Making his parents important is always a poor decision. It's never good when the comics do it, and it wasn't good when the TASM films did it. And then also making it to where he's no longer special because his father designed the spider to only work for him was a poor decision, because part of the draw of the character of Spider-Man is that anyone could be Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man could be literally anyone. It just happened to be Peter Parker that was bitten by the spider. He just happened to be the person that got bit. And if anyone else had have happened to get bit, it would have been them instead. And that's kind of the draw of the character, and is what makes him so relatable, because he's just kind of a regular dude who happened to get lucky and be given these great powers, but he also obviously has to deal with the great responsibility that comes with it. And they did tweak the great power, great responsibility line for this movie a little bit, because Uncle Ben essentially said that, but he added a bunch of words, and he made the point in a much more convoluted way that made it a little bit harder to follow. It's the same general gist as the classic line, but because they added a bunch of words and tweaked it, it just doesn't hit as hard as just the base one. And then I think the Lizard is a pretty bad villain. His motivation or like his like evil plan is kind of stupid. Like he wants to turn everyone in the city into lizards. They don't really give an explanation for exactly why he wants to do that. He just kind of does, and it's just kind of weird. He has no reason to want to do that. He just decides that's what he wants to do for some reason. But while the movie has a lot of bad aspects, it also has a lot of good aspects. Andrew and Emma's chemistry is great. They honestly have the best on-screen relationship out of the three Spider-Men, I think, because like just their chemistry together is just so good, and Gwen is kind of like the perfect partner for Peter, because she, you know, is just as smart as him, if not maybe even smarter, and she loved Peter first, not Spider-Man. Right? She says in the second movie that, you know, he's Spider-Man and that's great. She loves that, but she loves Peter Parker more. And that's, you know, the kind of the best thing about his relationship with Gwen is what makes it the best relationship out of the three, because she loves Peter before she loves Spider-Man, and she loves Peter more than she loves Spider-Man. With the Tobey films, MJ loved Spider-Man before she loved Peter, and she honestly loved Spider-Man more than she loved Peter, which was a big problem with their relationship. So Andrew and Emma's relationship really makes the TASM films what they are, and that's like truly the best part of both films is just their chemistry together and the dynamic that they have with each other. And I really like that they made Andrew's Peter actually smart. Like Tobey's was never really shown to be particularly all that smart. Like, he was said to have been smart occasionally, but he never really did anything to show us that he was smart. But Andrew shows us that he is as brilliant as Peter Parker should be from the very first movie, because he makes his own web shooters that work with web cartridges and web fluid, and then he also manages to make a cure for the lizard and all of the lizard people in the city, showing that he is very, very brilliant. Captain Stacy's death, they handled very well. It was very emotional. He had a great dynamic with Peter, and, you know, the film is not horrible. I definitely think Andrew is definitely very underrated as a character, and his movies maybe get a little bit too much hate. But it still has a lot of aspects about the film that I don't particularly like, so it goes here. Next up on the list is The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I know. Don't yell at me in the comments, okay? Let me explain why I have this movie as high up in the ranking as I do. First of all, everything I said about the first movie stands for this one as well. Right? All of the good aspects and the bad aspects stand for this, aside from the stuff I said about the lizard, because the lizard isn't in this movie. But I think this movie is honestly a little bit better, in my opinion, than The Amazing Spider-Man 1. Because it takes all of the good aspects about the movie and it improves upon them, while also improving some of the bad aspects of the movie. It does also double down on some of the other bad aspects, but I think it's really an improvement upon the first one. It took the best parts of the first one and made them better, right? It took his suit and it made it better, to where, you know, until Brand New Day, Andrew had the best live-action Spider-Man suit ever. Like, his suit in this movie is really good. And, you know, it took his Peter Parker characterization from the first movie, and it kept the parts of the portrayal that worked, while improving upon the ones that didn't work, right? He's far less emo in this movie, right? He's just normal, old Peter Parker. He's just, a normal guy who, is very smart, but he doesn't, act as emo as he did in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. And, this movie has always had a special place in my heart because this was the first film I ever saw in theaters. Like, this is the first movie I ever watched in theaters. So, because of that, it's always going to have a special place in my heart, and I'm always going to view it a little bit more highly than most people would. But, I don't have it any higher than this spot because I do know that the film has flaws which keep it from being able to be put any higher than this on my ranking in good conscience. But I think really, obviously, it has the same problems as the first TASM film with, his parents and not being special as Spider-Man and whatnot. And then I think Harry in this film is pretty bad. Like, his goblin design is just really ugly and just does not work at all. And I mean, the death of Gwen Stacy was done very well. Like, they did it well, but they didn't really have any setup and like build up to it, other than like just her dad in the first movie telling him to keep her out of it because people are going to get hurt. The people closest to him are going to get hurt because of what he does. Like, that's about really the only foreshadowing to her death that they really had. And Harry becoming the Green Goblin and showing up and killing Gwen just kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, her death was done very well, but what led up to her death I don't think was handled very well. And then a lot of people complain that the movie has too many villains, but really I don't really think it does, because Rhino is a very minor villain, and he's not really a Spider-Man villain that really has main villain potential anyway. He's kind of a villain that should really only work in the background and just kind of be like a small threat, a small inconvenience that he deals with. It is it maybe working for the main villain, or just kind of shows up as like, the first act battle to, kick off the movie, or like they did with this, where he shows up at the end of the movie in the Rhino suit and he, fights him and the movie ends. And then Electro, I think, is honestly a better villain than the Lizard. Like, I kind of like him better than the Lizard, because I find his plan and his motivation all more compelling than the Lizard's. Like, the Lizard just, for some reason, randomly wanted to turn people in the city into lizards. It didn't really have a good explanation for it. It didn't really make any sense. But Electro, he was a loser before he got his powers. He was picked on his entire life. He spent his whole life feeling powerless. Everyone kept looking down on him, beating down on him, treating him like crap, bullying him, and just making him feel like he was worthless and like he was powerless. So then when he finally gets powers and he finally gets something that makes him stronger than all these people that have been picking on him his entire life, he wants to use the powers to hurt those people, because people have treated him like crap and have made him feel powerless his entire life. So now that he has power, he wants to take power from all of the people who, treated him like crap when he didn't have his powers. Which, as a motivation, makes a lot more sense than just, I'm a lizard now, so I want to turn everyone else into lizards too. So I think Electro is a villain who really gets too much crap. Like, people like look down on him way too much. Like, he's a pretty decent villain, and I really don't mind his design, because I mean, they based it off of the Ultimate design of the character, which the MCU did a lot with their movies. Like, Nick Fury in the MCU is entirely based on the Ultimate Comics version of Nick Fury. So I don't really mind that Electro is modeled after the Ultimate Comics version of the character. I don't really have a problem with that. And I find his motivation to be better than Lizard's. And, they improved upon Peter's, characterization. he is even more lively and bright and fun as Spider-Man, with even more quips that are even better than his quips in the first movie. And it has, until Brand New Day came around, the best visuals out of any Spider-Man movie. Like, the visuals are absolutely amazing, with the swinging and the action and just the overall visuals. Like the movie looks amazing. And I really don't have as big of a problem with Electro as most people do. And, I don't mind Rhino being there either, because he's has a very small role, and that's really what Rhino should have if you're going to put him in a movie, because he's not really main villain potential, because he's kind of an idiot, so he can't really orchestrate like this whole master plan and be a main villain of a movie. So having him be a side villain who kind of shows up to be a nuisance at the beginning and end of the movie, I think works well for the character. Really, the only major problem I have with the movie is just Harry. I think they didn't handle him very well. If they wanted to do Death of Gwen Stacy, I think they should have introduced Harry in the first film and kind of started to set up him becoming Goblin, and then have him fully become the Goblin in this movie, and then kill Gwen at the end, and do the Death of Gwen Stacy, and the exact same way that they did it. I think, and improved upon the first film in a lot of ways. It does have its problems, but I don't think it has as many problems as the first movie, in my opinion. And obviously, because it's the first film I ever saw in theaters, it has a special place in my heart. So I did put it a little higher than most people would probably put it on their list. But, because it does have a good amount of problems, I can't put it any higher than this spot on the list. Next up is Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I think that people's nostalgia and the nostalgia factor of this film really blinds people to the true nature of the movie, because from a plot standpoint, the movie kind of sucks. The entire first act of the film is really bad. The whole, once all of, the different villains from the past movies and Toby and Andrew and all that start showing up, the movie starts to get good. But everything that leads up to that sucks from a writing standpoint. The entire setup for the film is, people know Peter is Spider-Man, and they think he killed Mysterio. So he can't get into college, and neither can his friends. So, instead of doing the smart thing and going to talk to the dean, which is what he should have done to start with, he thinks that the best possible way to solve his problem is to go to his wizard friend and have him cast a spell to erase everyone's memory. And that's not a good setup for a movie. That sounds like some kind of Saturday morning cartoon plot, not like a $250 million Marvel movie plot. It's not a very good plot. Everything that causes the villains to show up sucks from a writing standpoint. The entire first hour of the film is really badly written. The movie doesn't really get truly good until 10-20 minutes before Aunt May dies. And then everything after that is great. But there's an entire half of a movie before it gets good that sucks. It's a great theater experience, right? The movie's very fun to watch in the theater. It was a wonderful theater experience. It was great being there for the first time, seeing Toby and Andrew walk through those portals, everyone in the theater cheering and clapping, super excited to see them back. It was great. It was a great theater experience. but it sucks from like a story standpoint. Like the plot of the movie really sucks. Like the movie's poorly written. It's really poorly written for like the entire first half of the film. Like, there's a lot of great emotional moments in the second half of the film, but the first half of the movie exists, and the first half isn't very good. And I think people forget that the first half of the movie kind of sucks because they only remember the second half of the movie where Toby and Andrew show up, and it's a super fun time, with, all the Spider-Men, they do the pointing meme and all that. Like, yeah, that's great. They have a lot of great emotional moments. They talk about, Uncle Ben, Gwen, losing to Aunt May, the great power, great responsibility talk. They talk about, curing all of the villains. And it's the first time we actually see Toby get to be actually smart, because he manages to make a cure for Norman, which is the smartest the character's ever been, and it's crazy because it's not even in his movie. And this is the best writing Andrew had, and just his, reaction to him talking about how he handled Gwen's death and how he kind of closed himself off, just kind of focused on just being Spider-Man. He was just Spider-Man. Peter Parker kind of just stopped existing, and he stopped pulling his punches. He got bitter and started essentially probably killing criminals. That was great, and he finally got his redemption for Gwen by catching MJ. And once the villains were cured, I liked the nice little one-on-one that the Spider-Man had with some of their villains. The Peter and Otto thing, but the Toby and Otto thing, and the Andrew and Electro thing. I thought both of those moments were very nice. Like the third act of the movie is great, but like when it comes down to it, the film's just a fun theater experience that's a cameo fest that has a cool third act. From a writing standpoint, the first half of the movie kind of sucks. So realistically, I can't put it any higher than this. Next up on the list is Spider-Man 2. This is, a very good Spider-Man movie. It's one of the best ones that we've had. I think, Doc Ock is a great villain. Everything they do with him is really good. Toby obviously still has the same problem of, as a Peter Parker, as he does in all three of his films, where he's super, super dorky, but he's not very smart. Peter Parker shouldn't really be dorky. Yes, he is a nerd. He should be a little nerdy, but he should not be dorky. There is a difference between nerdy and dorky, and the Raimi movies portrayed Peter as more of a dork than a nerd. And, like, there's nothing that really shows that he's actually all that smart. Like, Otto says that he's brilliant but lazy, but we never actually see anything to show us that he is brilliant. They tell us he is, but he never does anything at any point in any of his three films to show that he's actually all that smart, right? There's a lot of great sequences in it, especially like the train sequence. That's really great. That's a great fight scene, and then him stopping the train, and then the people of New York pulling him in and saving his life after he saved theirs was a very great moment. It was a very nice moment, very sweet. I think Peter and MJ's relationship in the Raimi movies is just never particularly all that great. They don't have very good chemistry, and I think the fact that she falls for Spider-Man before she falls for Peter is kind of stupid. Like, that just shouldn't be how it works. It's like when they make Lois Lane fall in love with Superman and not Clark Kent. It just feels kind of shallow. It just makes the character feel shallow and feel like she only likes him because he has superpowers, and if he didn't have those superpowers, she probably wouldn't like him. So it just makes the character feel shallow and kind of hurts the relationship as a whole. So I think that's like the one of the biggest problems with the Raimi movies is their relationship, because it's never all that interesting to me, and I don't think they have particularly all that great of chemistry. Um, it's not a terrible movie. It's a very good Spider-Man movie, but I think other movies are better. Next up, Spider-Man 2002. This is a very, very good Spider-Man movie. It is the quintessential superhero origin story, right? It is really the reason that we have the MCU. If this movie wasn't successful with being as comic booky as it is, the MCU probably never would have existed. At least if not in the format that it does, because if this wasn't successful, then they would have assumed that what Fox did is the way to go. You make the characters wear black leather and be as grounded and uncomic booky as possible. So this is a very groundbreaking movie, very influential, very important, quintessential origin story. Obviously, Willem Dafoe is fantastic as the main villain. Right, Green Goblin is just a fantastic villain. He's definitely the best villain we've had in a Spider-Man film. He does a wonderful job, and obviously, it has all of the same problems that I had with Spider-Man 2, and also Spider-Man 3 in terms of Peter and MJ. It's definitely not a terrible movie. It's a very good film. It's a great Spider-Man movie. It's a great superhero movie. It kind of showed how you do a superhero origin story right. But it has some problems with it, really all of the same problems as Spider-Man 2 has, and I think other movies do Spider-Man better than this movie does, and at the end of the day, that's really the most important thing when it comes to a Spider-Man movie, because he is the main character. If you don't do him correctly, or another movie does it better and is like the same roughly quality-wise as your movie, then that movie is going to be a little bit better. So, it's a great movie. I love the film. Great origin story. Willem Dafoe, incredible villain. But I think other movies do Spider-Man better than this film. In fourth place is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is a very great Spider-Man film. It was the best live-action Spider-Man film until Brand New Day came out. It's better than the Raimi trilogy. Like, it genuinely just is. People's nostalgia for the Raimi trilogy makes them glaze the movies far too much. And I know that sounds a little hypocritical coming from me, because I put TASM 2, above 3 movies because of my nostalgia for it. But, like, Homecoming is a better Spider-Man movie than the Raimi movies. Like, all of people's complaints about the movie aren't valid. Like, people calling him Iron Boy Jr. and saying, that he's not even in New York. He was never in New York. He never had a solo movie where he was in New York. That's not true. He's in New York for a majority of this movie. He has, 3 scenes where he's not in New York. The rest of the film, he's in New York. He is New York, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for majority of the film. 3 scenes in the movie is not enough to say he's never in New York, because it's a 2 hour and something minute movie. 3 scenes not in New York does not mean he's never in New York. And then saying he's Iron Boy Jr., Iron Man's barely in the movie. He has maybe 5 scenes. He's in the movie for maybe 20 minutes. He has about as much screen time as Nick Fury had in Far From Home. People don't complain about Nick Fury being in Far From Home. So I don't know why they complain about Iron Man being in this movie, because they have the same amount of screen time. Iron Man's barely in the movie. This is a Tom Holland Spider-Man solo movie in New York. That's what the movie is. I think Vulture is a very good villain. His motivations are good. They did a good job at making him, a somewhat sympathetic villain. Before sympathetic villains became something that happens far too often. Tom does the best job at portraying both aspects of the character equally. His Spider-Man has the quippiness and the fun nature that he should have, and his Peter is nerdy but not dorky, and he is brilliant like he should be. A fun fact about the movie, it was actually written by the guy who played Sweets on Bones, which was a very cool fact to learn when I rewatched the movie a couple of days ago. So that was a very, very nice fact for me to find out. A very cool bit of information. But this is a quintessential Spider-Man movie. It's a very great film. Tom does a great job as the character. The main villain's pretty good. And all of people's biggest complaints about the movie aren't even valid complaints, because they just aren't true. This movie is the best movie in the home trilogy and one of the best Spider-Man movies. That's why it's here on the list. In third place is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is a very, very good movie. It's a masterpiece of animation. It takes full advantage of everything that you can do with animation, and it uses it to its fullest extent, and they made a visually stunning masterpiece of a film. And it's an almost perfect movie. But I do have one problem with the setup for the film that makes it where I can't put it in first place, because that one problem makes the premise of the movie fall apart a bit. Because the whole draw of the movie is there's a bunch of different spider people from all across the multiverse. They show up in one universe, and they all work together to stop a bad guy, and that's the whole draw of the movie. But the setup of it, what gets the spider people there, is Spider-Man is held into a super collider that spreads his DNA across the multiverse. But it's very unclear which part of his DNA was the part that drew the spider people there, and no matter which part it was, some of the spider people shouldn't be there. Because if it was the Peter Parker part of his DNA, Gwen shouldn't be there, because she's not a Peter Parker variant. All the other Spider-Men in the movie are Peter Parker variants, so them being there is completely fine. But Gwen shouldn't be there if it was the Peter Parker part. If it was the radioactive spider part, Spider-Ham shouldn't be there, because he was bitten by a radioactive pig, not a radioactive spider. And Penny Parker realistically probably shouldn't have been there either, because I don't think she was bit by a radioactive spider. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure she wasn't bit by a radioactive spider. So her and her mech suit also realistically shouldn't have been there. And if it was both combined, a Peter Parker bitten by a radioactive spider, if both parts of the DNA were put together, then that takes 2 to 3 of the Spider-Men out of the movie. So the setup to get the spider people there is confusing and doesn't actually make any sense if you stop and think about it, which hurts the movie and makes it to where I kind of have to put it here. It's a fantastic film, But that issue with the plot of the movie makes it where I have to put it in third place. The runner-up is Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is a really great film. It is the new quintessential live-action Spider-Man movie. It has everything that you would want from a live-action Spider-Man movie, except Spider-Man villains. That's really my biggest complaint with the movie, and really the only problem that I really have with the film. The Spider-Man villains take a back seat. Most of them are just kind of like a quick cameo included in a montage in the beginning, like Tombstone. The reason we didn't see him in the trailer is because he's barely in the movie. He has like 20 seconds of screen time in the montage that includes Tarantula, Boomerang, and Ramrod. Tombstone is a much bigger villain than those three guys, and realistically should have had more screen time in the movie. Especially because the actor that they got to play him is perfect for the role, because I'm seeing him on Black Lightning, like they're very similar. Tombstone and Tobias Well are very similar characters, and they got the actor who played Tobias Well to be Tombstone. So I was looking forward to seeing him in the movie because I knew he would do a fantastic job as the character, but he's barely even in it. And then Scorpion has more screen time, but he's a very minor villain in the movie. He's included in the montage at the beginning, where Spider-Man defeats him for the first time, and then he shows up again in the Scorpion suit later on, but it's not even him. He's being controlled by Sadie Sink's character. It's not really a spoiler who she's playing at this point because it's kind of obvious, and several people have already said it. So, I mean, I'm going to say who she's playing, so if you don't want to be spoiled, skip ahead like 10 seconds. Jean Grey was controlling Scorpion, and part of his screen time. And, like, it's just stupid. Like, realistically, this movie should have had more Spider-Man villains. They should not have used an X-Men villain as the main villain of a Spider-Man movie. And that's really my only real problem with the film, is that a Spider-Man villain was not the main villain of a Spider-Man movie. That's not really the way it should be. Spider-Man has pretty much just as many villains as Batman, if not maybe even more. So it's not that hard to find a villain to use as the main villain of the movie. He has a lot of villains, and a lot of them have main villain potential and have not been used as the villain of a Spider-Man movie yet. So I would have preferred if they used a Spider-Man villain as the main villain of the movie. But, other than that, the movie was great. It had a great message. It's the most relatable Spider-Man movie out of any of them. Because, most people in America, especially the people in Gen Z, can very heavily relate to the movie and to Peter's character in the movie, because he's broke, sad, and alone, like majority of Gen Z and majority of America. So, it's a very, very great movie. Great Spider-Man movie. It's the new quintessential Spider-Man movie. But I can't put it at number one because the lack of Spider-Man villains, the lack of a Spider-Man villain as the main villain, makes it to where I can't say that it's the best Spider-Man movie. Obviously, in first place is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is a movie that is just absolutely visually stunning. They take full advantage of what you can do with animation, even more so than they did in Into the Spider-Verse. It's just a truly masterpiece of a movie. It's visually stunning. They take full advantage of what animation can do that live action can't. And the movie is really practically perfect in every single way. There's a few things here and there that don't work as well as maybe they should. But none of the like small flaws in the movie are big enough to harm the movie's placement in any way. Like it's a movie that is visually stunning. It's a masterpiece of a movie, a masterclass in filmmaking, a masterclass in animation, and it's practically perfect in every single way. So it easily comes in at number 1. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please drop a like and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. I've got a bunch of other rankings and videos on my channel. If you like this, there's probably another video on my channel that you'll also enjoy. And I apologize for the length of the video, but there are a lot of Spider-Man movies, so I had a lot of material to cover, and I had a lot of things to say about some of the Spider-Man movies. So I apologize for the length. I tried to keep it as short as I could, but there's a lot of movies, and I had a lot of stuff to say about some of them. And anyway, please comment down below what your ranking of the Spider-Man movies is. I would love to hear your ranking. And I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one.